Here we are at another episode of Varsity House Podcast with your host, Shaun Crawford. I feel like today is a very special one. We brought in Carl Jones, again, my longtime friend, grew up together, sports anchor out in Rochester, New York, from Syracuse University. And then also we brought in Mike Renner. I mean, I think this is PFF analyst. I think this is an awesome opportunity just because I feel like I always see your takes and see your posts, and I feel like I never get the opportunity to like comment or have an opinion immediately. It's always like I see it later, and it's like I give my comment, he may not see it. So I think this is a cool opportunity to be able to talk to PFF's lead analyst, and so we brought in Mike Renner today, also a Golden Domer. So pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me on. You can rip apart all my takes here. I'm all ears for this.
No, I mean, it's crazy because, like us, I mean, we see it and it's kind of, we make takes too, but they're not public. Like our takes are in our group chat to our friends. And so we could be dead wrong and no one even knows except us. So, I mean, you're brave, you're courageous for even just making some of those takes, but I feel like we got to talk about one we can talk about is just the Aiden Hutchinson one. I feel like that was a big one in the media. You said Aiden Hutchinson was more talented than the Bosa brothers, and that may be true. But just I feel like with the product that the Bosa brothers both have put on the field, it's just a lot of people looked at that like, whoa, you know.
This one got completely misconstrued. Just completely misconstrued. I was sitting at home. I was getting quote tweeted by George Kittle, being like, "This guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about." I'm like, I just said more athletic, and it was pulled from a quote from me, literally comparing their combine numbers. So I'm going combine number. I'm on my podcast, the Tailgate Podcast, going number by number, and at the end of it, I'm like, look at in totality, he's more athletic. And so I was basically trying to rebuke the people saying that his ceiling is low, that he's capped out, that he can't be, a Pro Bowl, all-pro edge rusher in the NFL. I'm saying, well, look at him compared to the Bosas. He tested out more athletically than those guys, and I think they had pretty darn high ceilings themselves. So that was the take. It was not that he's going to be better. It's not that he is better, right, will be better, more talented, whatever. It's just that at the Combine, he was more athletic. And I think on the football field, he's a pretty darn good athlete in his own right, too.
I guess the question that I have, though, is that why do you believe that's the case for him not to have the same public opinion that the Bosa brothers have? Because, I mean, with Crawford and I both being from Ohio, we know all about the Bosa brothers and seeing their growth. And it's not like Hutchinson's not from a blue blood. Like Michigan is a perennial powerhouse in terms of, like, their notoriety. But why didn't he get the same love that they got?
Well, here's the thing. If you go back to Joey Bosa, I think there's some revisionist history because when Nick Bosa came out, everyone's in love. Everyone's saying he's going to be a monster, whatever. Like, there was no debate over him when he went number 2 to the 49ers. But when Joey was coming out, people were kind of low on his ceiling. You go back and look at anonymous scout quotes. Some people were saying he's tapped out. He's not going to get any better. This is as good as he's going to get. And so you had a lot of sort of dampering of the hype. And when he went number 3 overall, when he eventually did go to the Chargers, it was a bit of a surprise. He wasn't a slam dunk to be the guy he became in the NFL. And now once he was, and once you had that proof of concept that he could be that good, Nick Bosa, who was like damn near the identical player at Ohio State, everyone's like, okay, yeah, he's going to be Joey because they were the same in college. They're the same athletically. They're going to be the same in the NFL. So I think there's a little bit of revisionist history there. But why Aiden doesn't get that hype is because, well, his last name's not named Bosa. And 2, it took him longer. Like, he was a senior coming out before he did it. Nick Bosa was a freshman balling. Joey Bosa was a sophomore when he led the Big Ten in sacks and was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. So, like, it took him longer to do it. But also, Aiden Hutchinson broke his leg as a junior. I think he lost 25 pounds between his sophomore and senior seasons. Was a completely different type of player to where I do think the hype is still warranted. I do think he's still in not that caliber. I don't feel as certain, but I do think he should have been the number 1 overall pick.
Mm-hmm. How is it when you have to come out with the mock drafts and things like that? Because I see it as something people make careers off of projections, basically. Because you kind of got to be close a little bit to be valued, but I know Carl, he came out, he had to work on his own mock draft this year, and so he was talking about it, asking me about certain players and things like that, what I thought. But how is that process when you go into just like necessarily looking at what the team needs, or do you kind of just put that person's talent first?
Yeah, so it's a bunch of different things. And depending on the pick, it can be a different thing altogether than another. So you have to go and, look at talent first. You have to, I do my early mock drafts at the very least, is me looking at this guy and then thinking about how the NFL will view him. So I'm not just going to put, any old wide receiver in the first round just because the team needs a wide receiver. If there's not one worth taking there, I'm not just going to put one in the first round. So It's talent first. And then second, I look at obviously the team needs, where they're going to attack. You can say teams trust their board all they want, but they still do repeatedly again and again attack biggest needs on their roster to try to fill out the roster the best way. So, if you got Aaron Donald, you're not going to be drafting another 3 technique. That's just the way of the world. So that's number 2. And then number 3 that kind of gets factored in is just GM history and like how they've drafted. They're kind of what they covet, what they like at certain positions. And that was obviously the ultimate sort of deciding factor in why I flipped from Aiden Hutchins to Trayvon Walker in some of my later mocks, is because the history of Jaguars GM, I'm blanking on the name right now.
Baalke, I believe his name.
Trent Baalke, yeah, Trent Baalke. The history of Trent Baalke was he coveted long athletes. He drafted Eric Armstead. He drafted Alden Smith. He drafted DeForest Buckner. So he drafted these long defensive linemen. So he was going to go for that guy at number 1 overall. So that's kind of the third factor. And then as it does get closer to the draft, my final mock draft will be, I'm actually texting scouts I know. I'm actually texting guys I know in the league to be like, hey, give me something. What do you think? Where are these teams leaning? That's then the final one to hopefully get like 6 picks right. Because if you get 6 picks right in a mock draft, you did a heck of a job. It's just very difficult to predict every year.
So I guess we're going to take it back a little bit. Obviously, with the Mel Kipers and Tom McShays of the world, when they came out with this draft analysis and these mock drafts, they didn't have to like face the fan, so to speak, with the social media aspect that you have to do. So just talk about how hard it is to do your job when as soon as you put out a mock draft, Jets Twitter, Bills Mafia, Dog Pound, they're all on your head case about the picks and how you're making the wrong decision. Just talk about how hard that is and just to focus on your job and task at hand.
The thing is, I've kind of grown up in it. Like I've been doing this since 2012, since like when I first started, Twitter was already a thing. And so like I've always gotten feedback, like comments have been on articles, like that's always been a thing for my work. So it's something I've learned how to manage and tune out accordingly when like, it's obviously non-constructive feedback. But I do think there is something to what fans want and like gauging fans and them having a voice in the process. And it's something that we've actually done a lot of with our mock draft simulator on PFF.com, because we can track every time a team, someone who's a Jaguars fan, who they want, who they end up drafting number 1 overall, because I think that has some value just to get a gauge on these fan bases and where they're leaning and what their needs are. But it is a lot of it, I'd say 95% of the comments, I don't even come across. Like I'm not, if it gets tweeted out from our main account, PFF.com or the PFF main account, I'm not going to go scrolling through comments to see what people think of it, because it's never going to be good. No one's going to say, wow, that mock was spot on, because no one's is the thing. So I do think it's fun. Like that's the whole, I keep coming back to with the draft. Like it is fun. It is hope. And so I try to keep it as fun as possible, and I'm not engaging in the people that want to go negative with it.
I researched that obviously you went to Notre Dame, but you studied accounting and computer applications. So how did football come about? Because I also saw that you grew up in Illinois. You're a pretty good hooper out there back in your day. And so how did football come about? And like did the college with NB connection have anything to do with that?
So it actually didn't, wildly. I started at PFF right out of Notre Dame back in 2012. They bought the company in 2015. So that was right after Austin graduated, I believe. I think he may have had one. Yeah, it was right after he graduated. That was his 5th year. And so they bought the company then. And so it was kind of just random coincidence. But I actually did some research projects for a stats professor in the business field about football and football analytics specifically. And that helped me land the job starting out at PFF. They were a tiny company back then. I think it was one of the first 10 employees at the entire company. And so always just loved sports and always loved football. And I think the problem was I went to a tiny high school that they didn't even have football. They didn't have a football program. So I never really got to scratch that itch. I never got to play. So I played basketball, obviously, but I am 6 foot tall. I am white. I was not going to play basketball any further than that. So I went to Notre Dame fully realizing that sports were done for me at that point. So this kind of scratched the itch, and I was like, I can actually work hard at this. This is something I'm going to love to do, whereas accounting was not something I was going to love to do if I stuck with accounting.
So you talked to me about Notre Dame. How much of that, talk about that experience a little bit, because I'm sure ours was different just because Drew came from just, I guess, being what we call it, a narc. And then I came from just the athlete side of things. But I'm sure just the community, and then just like, because a lot of people don't realize that, like, at Notre Dame, when you're an athlete, you're put into dorm rooms and your living space is with like regular students. And so the community is tight, and you get to know pretty much everyone on campus like pretty quickly, especially the people in your dorm. So could you guys talk about like maybe some players that you maybe interacted with, or some coaches or anything like that kind of just like sparked this passion?
That's good. So I was in freshman year. I was in the same dorm. I was in O'Neill Hall as Cal Rudolph, who was there. And so I had some interactions with him. I never really was close with any actual football players. Like, never was like friends where I would hang out with. But definitely knew a handful of them. I ended up playing my senior year. I had transferred to Siegfried and played in the actual inter-hall football, which was fun because obviously I hadn't played tackle football since I think 7th grade. And so that was fun. I played defensive line, and I am 180 pounds. So that tells you like the competition level we're working with there. But I did love it. I loved the camaraderie of the student body, and the fact that, like you were saying, like, you are there with football players. They are going to your classes. They aren't, if they're not going to the classes, which I do have a funny story about that I probably can't tell on this podcast to bust them out. But like, if they're not going to the classes, it's not a good thing. And they will get called out for it and will get, suspended, like, Everett Golson for a whole year did. So it is something that they take very seriously there. And football and the Notre Dame football program is a big reason why I went to Notre Dame in the first place.
Carl, talk about, I wanted to mention, obviously Syracuse, like, we're both Notre Dame guys. And so, Newhouse is obviously a big school, as far as in communications, whether it's broadcasting, sports, all that sort of thing. How did that come about for you?
Yeah, so it's funny. When I committed to Syracuse out of high school, I had no idea about Newhouse. That was the first Power 5 offer I had, so I jumped on it, and the rest is history in that regard. And as the years go on, the NFL dreams are looking a little bit more bleak. And because of COVID, I had to go back to school, and I was like, you know what, let me get a master's in something that Syracuse is known for, in Newhouse. And I was fortunate enough to get that done. And as you know, Croft, man, we used to argue day in and day out. Lunchroom, before school, sports. And like, I always got teased for being Stephen A. and teased for being Michael Smith. I was always just known as that guy, just getting teased for that. And I just said, why not turn this passion into a career? And that's kind of how that came to be. And seeing, I guess, from a distance as a player, how we thought of the media, right? And then now that I'm transitioning into this space, and how the misconceptions that you kind of have when you are playing, and how things are different on the other, I guess, the other side of the table. It's very interesting, and it's only been a year and a half for me, but my world has turned upside down on what I thought my entire career in terms of player versus media relations.
Mike, I saw your tweet today. You mentioned that I think someone in your family got 6 Notre Dame Ohio State tickets.
Yes, sir.
I'm very excited about that game. I'm from Ohio, so I can't wait. Like, my whole dream was being able to play Ohio State, so I'm glad that they get to do it now, especially at the shoes. Hopefully we can go down there and get a win. But I guess talk about we can jump on the college football topic a little bit now, but talk about just that game and like what excites you about that game.
I mean, it's like a statement game. Notre Dame's got their upcoming, the 2023 recruiting class is ranked number 1 by every service at the moment. Marcus Freeman is doing work right now on the recruiting trail. The buzz around this program is at an all-time high. Like, they have a lot on the line that if they go into the shoe and somehow pull off the upset, and I'm not going to say that they're going to go in there and do it. Like, Ohio State's unbelievably talented. They bring back so many good players. Like, CJ Stroud is right up there in the mix for the number 1 overall pick already. That it's going to be tough, but if they can pull off that win, like the kind of momentum that could boost this program going forward is off the chart. So like I said, when my brother texted me, he got 6 tickets because he has season tickets for Notre Dame. I was through the moon because that atmosphere. I was at Ohio State, Oregon last year for work, and the shoe rocks, man. Like 100,000 plus in that stadium. It is going to be quite the atmosphere, and I think there's going to be a good deal of Notre Dame fans there too.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about that. I've been to a couple. I've been able to go to Notre Dame games now and like watch it as a fan. And it's definitely tough to see, but like I've never been to an Ohio State game. Only time I've been in the shoe is when we played for our state championship game in high school. So I'm definitely very excited to see that. I mean, nice game. I'm sure I'm just thinking about it. Like I touch the guys all the time, and I'm just making sure like you guys are like make sure they're ready because I'm doing my part, talking trash, doing all that stuff to my friends who are fans of Ohio State. So I just got to make sure that they're on their thing, that they're doing their thing.
Are you going?
Yeah. I'm gonna try to get this.
Oh yeah. Meanwhile, I'm over here. Meanwhile, I'm over here worried about Clemson and Boston College when they come in and whoop us, and y'all over here got the biggest game of the year, week 1. So whatever.
Sean Tucker's going to have a good year. What do you think of Sean Tucker, Carl? Is he going to be RB1 next year?
Well, first off, you got him 5th, so we got. No, I'm kidding. But I'm happy that you showed him some love. I wasn't on campus with Shaun Tucker, so I don't know him personally. But from all accounts, he's a great guy, and clearly my dude can tote the rock as well. So I guess about Shaun Tucker, what do you see about him before we go back to that conversation?
I mean, he is built like a rock, man. I mean, he's got to be somewhere in like the under sub 10% body fat at like 215 pounds. I mean, he's jacked. And then I think he ran like 4.3 coming out of high school. Like his long speed is sneaky. It reminds me of like Jonathan Taylor in that regard, where I don't think you'd ever just like looking at him be like he's moving fast. And then all of a sudden he's just like running by guys and breaking angles left and right. He just moves almost so smoothly that his speed kind of sneaks up on you. So I think that's a very good starting point to be that strong and that fast. And now he's not super creative or whatever, but that's a style that runs and plays in the NFL. So I'm a big fan of his. And I'm a big fan of his Twitter game too. I don't know if you guys seen his tweets, but after every game, the way he's like, today I had an okay game. 8 carries, 100 yards. Those crack me up every single time.
Man, it's funny because like in the group chat, we always see that, man. It's hilarious. It's hilarious, man.
You mentioned CJ Stroud, and so you have Bryce as your number 1 right now. What are some things that I guess separate Bryce and CJ that you see currently? Because as we know, it may change. Because I was checking back, and last year it was Spencer Rattler was like the number one on your board, and we see how things turn out. So, what are some things that separate Bryce from CJ currently at the moment?
Yeah, QB position, man, it's fickle. It can be, those evals change every year. But to me, the biggest thing, and I feel like this year already, Bryce and CJ compared to last year, Spencer, I feel so much better about those two than I ever did Spencer. Spencer was almost like one by default. And it's because, one, that class was weak just in general in terms of top end talent, and two, like quarterbacks, obviously we saw where they ended up getting drafted. There just wasn't a ton. So this year, I think it's vastly different. And the biggest difference between Stroud and Young is, to me, the creativity aspect. Like the plays that are kind of not, read it, throw it, guy open, hit the spot. They both can do that lights out. I mean, they're both not missing a ton of open throws. But Bryce Young, I keep going back to, I don't know if you guys remember this, the SEC championship against Georgia. I mean, he faced an NFL defense and absolutely lit him up. But he had one play where John Mechie runs a post and his post right into the safety, and he points. He's like, go corner instead. Like, break it off, go corner. And then throws it as soon as he breaks corner. And it's like that sort of, and that's from the pocket with guys bearing down on him, that sort of confidence to be able to say, hey, do that, change this route is something I think the Mahomes of the world, the Allens of the world, the high-end quarterbacks of the NFL possess. And it's not a must, but it's kind of, it's like I said, you asked for a separator. That's the separator between those two right now, whereas Stroud's much more robotic in the pocket and how he operates.
Now, you have 5 first-round quarterbacks in your current mock draft, And when I think of that number, I got to go back to 2021 and that amazing. It was touted as a generational class at the moment. Here we are 2 years later, and we got another 5 QBs. Just, I guess, what are your thoughts on the two classes and how do they compare?
So I don't think so I said I feel very good about Young and Stroud. They're 1-2, if I were to release a board right now, those would be the top 2. But I don't feel as good about either of them as I did even Fields Lawrence back a couple years ago. Like, those guys were special dudes. They were special recruits. They were special, early on their collegiate careers. I wouldn't put them in that tier just yet. But I do like the depth of this class. I do think there are a lot of toolsy guys and that have already shown it. Guys like Tanner McKee from Stanford, Will Levis from Kentucky, even like Anthony Richardson from Florida. There's a lot of guys with like high-end potential in this class. So I don't think any class will touch that one, honestly. And obviously we haven't seen it in the NFL, but that one was pretty special in terms of, QBs going 1, 2, 3. And that doesn't even include Fields, doesn't even include Mac Jones. So that one had a ton of talent. But this one's probably a tier behind that, but a clear tier or 2 above what we saw last year.
Got you. Shaun just booted, so I guess I just lose him in that regard. Where did you go to high school?
I went to a high school called University Laboratory High School in Champaign, Illinois. Or it's in Urbana, Illinois. Right by the campus, University of Illinois. Gotcha.
See, when I saw Cincinnati hometown, I couldn't get your high school. That's why I was kind of confused on where you were.
No. I've been here since when PFF moved here. So when Collinsworth bought it, that's when I moved here. So because Collinsworth lives here.
How you like Cincy?
I like Cincy a lot, man. I've been here 7 years now. I'm a big fan. Where are you from originally?
So we're both from Cleveland. So we both went to St. Edward, the powerhouse up in Cleveland, and led to where we are now. I'm up in Rochester now, New York, so about an hour east of Buffalo.
How do you like upstate New York? That's a little different weather. I guess Cleveland's pretty bad weather too, but
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of used to it at this point, doing 5 years at Syracuse, and but after my little contract is up here in 2 years, I'm definitely trying to relocate out of the upstate area. Yeah, I'm trying to get up out of this area for sure. Now, I guess a question that because I'll wait for Prof to get back, but a question that I do have though, how often do you look at other like media outlets like Draft Network and Draft Dudes in terms of like your content and like weighing against other people?
I like to do it like at this point in time. Now I do have access to like Blesto and like the scouting services to see, but I like to do it at this point in time just to see like where people stand on guys. And as a check, like I'm pretty good about, and now no one's, perfect about not being influenced by others, but I'm pretty good about going in just being like out of curiosity, not to be like, I want to know, and then I'm changing my ranking sort of thing. So I do it at this point in time. I don't look a lot during the season unless it's like someone identifying sleepers. And then I'll look later in the process after I've kind of watched a bunch of guys. I'll go around and be like, okay, now here's my opinion on guys. Where do other people stand? And then kind of if someone's like super high in a guy, super low in a guy, I'll be like, oh shit, maybe I need to go back and see what they're saying, or even like DM them and be like, dude, what the hell what's going on here? Why are you seeing this?
How often do you look at DJ stuff and Bucky Brooks?
I like DJs a lot because he'll always have one or two guys every year. I'm like, okay, that's actually interesting. Like it was Mekhi Becton a few years ago. I was like, oh shit, I hadn't seen him that high. And then so I'll look at his and talk to him a good amount. Bucky just comes out with the rankings. He doesn't do like his actual board, which I don't. Obviously, I'll look at them, but like you don't get a full real take on how he sees where those guys stack up. Because it's like, oh, you can have like those guys ranked 1 through 5, and like say like the quarterbacks this year. But then is it like 1 through 5 and they're first rounders, or is it 1 through 5 and they all suck? So that's always like good information to know.
Yeah, it says Shaun's in here, but I don't know where he. Oh, he just said he just left. Never mind. But oh, okay, no, that's cool. That's cool. So then, I guess what PFF wasn't huge when you joined, though, were they?
No, I found them.
Chance, like, what made you take that leap?
That's a good question. I probably shouldn't know. Like at the time, my parents thought I was crazy because I just found the website because I was like a massive Packers fan, and I just like would read everything about the Packers. And like one on the Journal Sentinel, the Milwaukee newspaper, they had like quoted some PFF something. This was probably my junior year, probably back in 2010. They quoted something about Packers for PFF, some PFF stat or something. And I'm like, okay, what the hell is that? What's PFF? Go look, and like they have all these stats, and back then they used to give them all away for free, and it was just like they didn't sell anything. And so that whole fall, I would go and like check the PFF grades, PFF stats afterwards, and it was cool. And then the next year they started charging, and that was my senior year. I'm like, oh shit! But then I kind of stopped going, but I went back and looked like the spring because I didn't want to be an accountant. Like I had said, I really didn't want to do accounting. I was looking for anything else to do after I graduated, and they were hiring like an analyst. It was like data analyst. I'm like, I can do that. I think I could do that. I applied, and it was like a few rounds of interviews, and I got the job, and it was like I said, tiny company back then, and they didn't pay much, but I was like, I will do whatever it takes to like make this real. So I did. It's cool.
Dope. So I saw you were talking about you guys were talking about Cincinnati and things like that. Did you touch on that all? Just like the Bengals run and just how like I guess impactful that was to just the city of Cincinnati and maybe even to like some of the takes and things that you were involved in.
It was insane. So I live right down between the football and the baseball stadium, and the energy down like the whole playoff run was. And now for some of it, I was gone at the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl because I was right in the mix of those. But being here for the Super Bowl, being here for the wild card win over the Raiders, like the city, I've never seen it quite like this. And they've like, this town loves football. You know, like the talent that comes out of Ohio football wise is insane, like the whole state, but especially Cincinnati, just in terms of like at the younger ages, the amount of people playing the sport that they've always like wanted to get behind a winner, but it was just the commitment to winning from Cincinnati was suspect, and they're kind of like a defeated, talking like a lot of my friends I know around town, there's like a defeated attitude. I just like never thought good things would happen to them. But I do think like the Joe Burrow effect, the personality he brings, along with Jamar Chase, along with T. Higgins, like along with all these guys they've drafted in recent years, is real. Like there is a real culture change and culture shift that you've seen, not just the organization, but the city itself, surrounding the team, the passion that like they actually believe now. So it's been really, really cool to see, because vastly different than when I first moved here. It was 2015. It was the playoff game, the fumble against the Steelers. That was like their year that they just like expected it not to go well. This year, they finally expected things to go well for them. And so very cool. Couldn't happen to, a city that loves football more.
That's cool. You mentioned the Senior Bowl, which is going to be a topic. How important do you think that game is? Because especially like nowadays, like you got some of the quarterbacks, the high profile ones, come out as juniors, and even some of the other players come out as juniors. How important do you think that game is? And I know people are talking about like stocks rising and things like that, but do you see that a lot, like while you're there?
It's huge, truthfully, for me. Like I think it's one of the biggest events on the NFL calendar. Are those games, because, and especially like for a guy who plays smaller level competition, group of 5, FCS guys, anyone from that level that goes there, it's almost like it is your evaluation is that game of how they play football and that week of practices, because seeing them, I'll just say Jalen Tolbert from this past year, South Alabama wide receiver, watching the corners he goes up against, it doesn't matter. Like that every guy on an NFL roster is going to look good against them. So like that tape does not matter. If you do it then against the guys who will be on NFL rosters, I don't care like if it's a weak cornerback class down the Senior Bowl, every single one of them is still going to be on an NFL roster. That matters. And like so the guys that show out, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, like the guys that have gone down there and had big weeks tend to translate because they're doing against guys that they will face the next level. And so I do think it's a massive part of the evaluation process. I put a good deal of stock in it because it's hard to fake looking good against other NFL players. Like it's the ultimate sort of litmus test there.
That's interesting. I feel like we got to touch on this, but the whole Bachelorette. How does
we didn't have to, Shaun. We really didn't. You said you felt like we had to. We really didn't.
I feel like we got to because I feel like everyone knows PFF Mike. That's the name. That's the name on Twitter. That's the account handle. So I feel like everyone knows that. And I especially especially on my podcast, I like to talk about just like the stories, the different experiences, and things that led to get you where you are now. And so, was that just like an opportunity? Did someone reach out to you, or was that just like, hey, like I'm gonna enter my name in this and just see where it goes?
So that actually, this is kind of funny. It started at a Notre Dame tailgate in, I guess that would have been 2017. I was there when my buddy's tailgates. He had a friend. So my buddy was 2 years old. It was actually my brother's roommate. So my brother went to Notre Dame. He's 2 years older than me. It was his tailgate. And they had a friend who was 2 years older than them who was going to be on the season before that they brought up. They're like, oh, hey, this is my friend. He was going to be on the season before. And I had met him a few times, but and I asked him like, oh shit, like, why didn't you go on? He's like a baseball agent. He couldn't do it with work. Like, it just wasn't going to work out. And I'm like, can you put me in touch? Like, you know, right people where to send my stuff. He's like, if you send me a video, like I know the casting director, I could just pass it along. And so that was how it started. Made a video, sent it to the casting director, whole process going through, flew me out to LA, final casting, get on the show. And so that was how it all started. But it's not real life. It was one of the weirder experiences. It was actually like legitimately not enjoyable to be there, like on the show at the time, because it's like stressful and you don't do anything. Like between takes and between times you're on camera, you can't watch TV, you can't go on the internet, you can't listen to music. There was nothing for you to do besides get pissed at these other guys, basically. And this was like during NFL free agency, and so I'm like asking the producers, I'm like, you know, where Josh sit inside? And I'm like asking like these like random free agents, hoping they'd tell me, and sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. So it was a whole weird experience, but man, no regrets, but glad I didn't come out looking like an idiot. I didn't even get like any airtime, so thankfully, but it was fun. It was fun in retrospect.
Wait, why did you cut the hair though? I seen the picture and you had the long hair, and I'm looking now. Where'd the hair go? Why that leaving?
Oh, if you saw the picture, you probably should know why I cut the hair. I mean, it was not a good look. I got a lot of Fabio comments, a lot of comments that I probably can't repeat. But yeah, it was just the actual real reason why I cut it was to upkeep, dude. It takes a lot. Like how much girls have to go through to keep their hair like looking somewhat presentable. I was appalled. What I got right now, I don't even need shampoo. I go in the shower, I don't even worry about it. So that's why I had ended up cutting the hair.
Do you think that that opportunity helped your career at all? Like maybe just the connections that you were able to make, or not really?
Honestly, probably not much. I mean, it probably helped with visibility to a degree. Like people know that it's fun in retrospect, but I mean, in terms of like what I've actually done at PFF, they didn't give a shit. Like they're like, I'm not the draft analyst because I went on the Bachelor. Like I'm the draft analyst because the takes I got. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. What were some of your takes on? Because obviously Notre Dame, but what were some of your takes on Kyle this year? As a Notre Dame fan, you've probably watched his entire career, but I guess some say he didn't have the best, pre-draft try or workouts and things like that. I think he fell to a perfect, I'd say fell, but he still went 14, but to the perfect situation. What were some of your takes on that? I saw you said he had the same flying 20 as the guy from Georgia who ran a 4.3. So what's some of your takes on some of the like naysayers, and then maybe even some of like that, like how much do you believe in the pre-draft workouts and things like that, opposed to what's actually on the game tape?
Yeah, and game tape, and like we have GPS now. You know, we get numbers on how fast these guys are playing the game of football, and his GPS times were elite for the safety position. Like when he's at top speed, he is fast. And I think Chris Collinsworth, he said it on the show, because Chris is like 6'5", and obviously was an NFL wide receiver. He's like, I could not beat any of the wide receivers on our team for the first 10 yards, first 15 yards of a 40. Everyone was ahead of me. At top speed, no one could touch me, because that's what, tall guys, it's tough to get out of the box. So I just think that was it. Like, it was completely overblown because he could not start well at 6'4". But no one's asking him to play in a 3-point stance at the safety position.
Right.
You know, like his standstill burst numbers, his broad jump was elite. And you see that on tape, like when he wants to get it going from, a flat foot read, he is elite. So, I thought all that stuff was so overblown. And now, like you said, fell to 14. Is that a fall? Was it more just safety and safety value that ended up caused him to go there? We'll never really know. But I mean, he was about as safe a thing as it exists in this draft. Dude's going to be a stud. You don't find 6'4", 220 guys that are as fluid as he is, let alone explosive and fast. So yeah, he's going to be a monster.
I guess going off that conversation a little bit, man, with PFF, everyone from the outside kind of just associates you guys with numbers and the grades that you guys throw out there and stuff of that nature. So how much do you truly weigh the eye test in the film? And I know you watch a ton. I think I want to make that clear. You guys just don't look at grades and say, boom, this is that. I know you guys watch a ton of film. But how much do you weigh that versus the grades that you guys create when you create those algorithms and stuff like that?
Yeah, the draft board is my opinion. It is not the grades. It is not like a model or an algorithm spitting this stuff out. It is me watching the tape, me taking in every factor that I can viably take in to come to an opinion on how that guy will fare in the NFL. So a lot of it is tape. Like that, it is, I would say 90+% is the tape. And now obviously you're always, there's no real way, actually, percentage is probably the wrong way to describe it, but it is a tape evaluation that is then adjusted by off-field issues, then adjusted by, size, then adjusted by, role he'll play in the NFL versus role he played in college, adjusted by a number of different things then from there. But the basis of the PFF Draft Board and what we do here is still tape evaluation and analysis. And that's kind of what it's always been. Like, people associate us with stats and grades, but like those come from someone watching the tape and evaluating those. Our whole thing is why we collect our own stats is because, the tackles and all the stuff that gets collected by the NFL is someone in the booth having to do that immediately after watching the play once. Like, we get to watch the play twice, rewind it, who actually made that tackle, who actually did their job right. And so that's why we still say the tape is still king. And so if people think the board is just some amalgamation of numbers on a page, it's really not that whatsoever.
Do you dive into just looking at it as a defensive guy? I hate this stuff. Biggest thing I hate is say we're in two man or something, and I'm playing trail and I don't have a safety over top and I get beat deep or something. Do you guys go try to figure out what the the scheme is and what the play is before you make that make that number? Mm-hmm.
Yes. So coverage grades, coverage stats are evaluated based off of responsibility, assignment based. And now there will be busts at times where it's we don't know who's wrong. Right. One I thought of was that I remember debating Bobby Slowick, who was on our staff, who's now the 49ers offensive passing game coordinator, actually, was debating whether the bust was a safety incorrectly going to the middle of the field to play 3 cloud, which is something you rarely see, or whether the safety was supposed to go back out into a Tampa 2 deep half alignment. And I'm debating and going back and looking through previous plays, previous times they've run that defense in that situation. And he ended up being right. I was wrong. It was actually supposed to be 3 cloud, but I'm just teams never fucking run 3 cloud. That's a ridiculous, but it was. So we tried to evaluate the coverage. We collect the coverage on every single play, the actual, buckets of was it cover 2, was it cover 3, was it quarters, whatnot. And then we assign it based off of those responsibilities and what they should have done. And obviously we're not in the room. Sometimes it's difficult, especially like I said, with busts, to really say who did it wrong, who did their job wrong. But yes, when you get a coverage stat, it is not just who was the closest defender. It is actually whose responsibility should that have been on that play.
Now, both Shaun and I have been in these locker rooms and as players, and if after a game, we're nosy, we're going to go on the Twitter sphere, and we're like, man, hold on, how such and such get a 71, man? They went in the locker room. They don't know what our responsibility is here. And then nowadays, especially in the league, Tyrann Mathieu tweeting at y'all, and other players are tweeting at y'all oh, no, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. I guess, how do you guys weigh believing what you do in your model and the grades that you guys put out versus some of the vitriol and the backlash that you get from some of these guys who, I guess, don't really understand what your job actually is, and then just staying true to what you guys are.
It is funny, though. Those players never – I don't think I've ever heard a player say we don't know what we're talking about when they've graded well for a game. No one's ever like, I played like shit. I don't know why you guys gave me a good grade there. It's always the other end. It's like someone's got to play like shit for you guys to give up points. So, no, I mean, it's something we've gotten since day one, though. Since an outside evaluator started putting a number to you. And no one wants it. Like, we understand. No one wants to be told from someone outside their locker room how well they're playing. They know how well they're playing. Their coach knows how well they're playing. That's all that should matter. And, like, to them, like, you should tell us to kick rocks. Like, you should not give a damn about the number we put on you, for sure. Like, that is not something that should factor into your equation, but it is a product for fans. It is a product for independent evaluators who aren't in the rooms, who don't have access to your exact assignments, your exact play calls, that exact, adjustment you got on that play. So it is our best guess, and that's all like independent evaluation can be. Like, you can never go into someone else's locker room. And so that doesn't mean you shouldn't try and not try to evaluate guys at all. You still got to sign free agents, still got to draft players. So it is doing our best with limited information that is all we're ever going to get. And like I said, it's not something that anyone who's actually in the NFL should use to use as a number to feel the way they should feel about themselves. No, they should use what their coach is saying, use what they themselves know.
I wonder do players, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but I wonder if players use the numbers to their benefit when it's like when it's contract time.
Oh, they do. They definitely do.
When it's like, hey, how are you playing? Like, maybe you're getting older, or maybe maybe they're trying to devalue you or something like that, to where it's like, maybe I'm a free agent. It's like, hey, this is what I did according to PFF, who's now you're gassing it up. Now you're putting like value to that number. Have you encountered any situations to where it's like, or maybe any scouts that you've heard from that where it's like, this player really uses or his agent, his team use PFF to talk?
As I say, so the players hate us, but agents love us. I think the first agent to use our stuff in the contract negotiation was Cameron Wake, actually, back in maybe 2012, I want to say. 2011 or 2012. Cameron Wake's agent was the first one, because Cameron Wake was like the sub-package rusher who, maybe his sort of sack total didn't say that he was elite, but it was because he was playing like 300 snaps a year, but he was a monster on a per-snap basis. So he was the first one, and now we'll probably have dozens every offseason of contract negotiations that involve PFF data. I just can't speak to the exact ones. But yeah, it's not uncommon. And it actually is very common for agents to use what we have at PFF and even stuff we don't even offer to the public in their contract negotiations.
Well, I didn't even think about that. That's actually funny to even think about. The players not liking it, but when it's used for their benefit,
right?
Oh yeah, that 88, give my value up for sure. I didn't think about that.
So, what do you see? I guess, where do you see yourself? Do you? I feel like you've already came a long way just from Notre Dame to where it's like you kind of had a career change, or like you went in doing accounting and things like that, and you found your passion with sports. Where do you, and then also just the whole Bachelorette thing. So it's like, now where do you see yourself? Like, do you think you want to stick around PFF and continue to just do draft analysis, or do you think you just want to use this as like a stepping stone and just continue to build relationships and things of that nature?
Well, I'm definitely not going back to the Bachelorette. I can put that one to bed right now. That's a good question. I really don't know exactly what the future holds. I love what I do there at PFF, and I love the draft, but I would like to do more than just the draft. Draft is great to focus on for 5 months out of the year, but I put out player rankings. I've been putting out 2023 player rankings throughout this week, and no one really gives a shit. You try to talk about the draft in September, and people don't care. So I would like to do more than just that. I would like to get into even announcing games. I think the dream would be something like, I don't know, Todd McShay's role at ESPN, where he does the draft in the spring, but on the fall, he's on sidelines doing, talking about the players, evaluating stuff and really like involved in more broadcasts. I think that would be a lot of fun. I actually did a broadcast game or like a couple trial games of doing color commentary with Jack Collinsworth, who now obviously he was doing that for the USFL. He's announcing USFL games as the play-by-play guy. But I think that would be awesome. Now, obviously, I'm not sure there's any non-former player that's like actually in a color commentary booth, but just anything like, even if it is just sideline work like that, I think would be awesome too. So that's probably the dream. But I do think PFF, I believe so much in our mission in terms of just making the best football analysis there is. I never want to get into the hot take game, like the Aiden Hutchinson's more athletic than the Bosa's take. Like, I don't ever want to be in that game where I'm being dishonest and saying things I don't believe in just to try to generate headlines, clicks, whatever. Or like, who was it? Was it Sam Macho's top 5 quarterbacks that didn't have Patrick Mahomes? It's like, I never want to be that guy who gets convinced to do that thing. So I always believe in actually giving good analysis, making that analysis as entertaining as possible. So whoever's going to let me do that, that's what I want to do, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I mean, there's like a couple more things I want to talk about, but it's interesting because we talk about like you didn't play football and you said there's not many like former player, or there are not many people in the color commentating role that aren't former players. Did you see Kevin Durant's like whole rant last week? I think it was, where he was talking about Stephen A. He was talking about Shannon Sharp, who didn't play basketball, and their takes on the sport. To where it's like, I feel like you could talk about this to where it's like this is something that you study daily, hourly, to where it's like you really understand the game. What would be like your take on, or I guess like your opinion to what Kevin Durant was saying about people who haven't played the sport but give their take on the sport?
I think he was more targeting a specific demo of that I was kind of just targeting there with the guys who are dishonest about it, who focus on things that don't matter to the sport. Like the conversation about who's, the GOAT that gets brought up literally hundreds of times a year is not relevant to what's going on in a basketball court. And I think that's what I push back on too. And it's like they do that because they know people click on it. They know people watch that. They know it gets shared. And they know it gets talked about. And that's kind of the way of the media today. That's what generates revenue, is eyeballs, is just users. So it is a game that they play that, again, it's not productive to what's actually going on and not making people better fans. It's leading to worse fans and people who trash talk Kevin Durant on Twitter saying he sucks. It's like, when objectively not the case. So that's what I push back on too. So I agree with him in that case. But I will say I don't think it was just because they haven't played the game. It's because they're going about a dishonest manner in the way they're analyzing the game.
I will say this, Croft, and you know this to be true as well. There's a lot of people who did play the game who don't know what they're talking about as well. There's a lot of dudes in that locker room where if you want them to draw up cover 3 and the responsibility of the will backer, they would tell you that he deep third or something like that. So it's
and that's the other thing that I say about football all the time is 22 guys with very unique roles that are unique to them, that are limited to them, that are simplistic in their manner. But when it's all encompassing, it's complex. But the right tackle doesn't know what the hell a cornerback's supposed to do. Like your center could not tell you the safety's responsibility, against double posts. Like it's a complex game in that there's so much going on at one point, but everyone has their role and their limited scope that they're not thinking about the whole game holistically. So I don't care what player it is, besides maybe quarterback position, no one's going to really, I don't care how long you've played, unless you really are a student of the game, you haven't understood and have no real more insight than I do on what it takes to play the running back position if you were, say a safety.
Quickly, I want to maybe, do you have because I know you just came out with your early 2023 mock draft. Do you have like a sleeper that you think that's gonna pop into the top 10? You think?
A sleeper from next year's class. Okay, so I do actually have one. I'm not sure if he's a sleeper yet, but it's just a guy who's very off the radar that you would never expect based off the school he went to. But there's a guy named Andre Carter who plays at Army, who is a 6'7", 260-pound defensive end that is awesome. This guy is powerful. I don't know how he ended up at Army. He didn't even play as a freshman, which I'm not even sure about. Army might not actually let guys play as freshmen. Yeah. I think that might actually be even a rule there. But he is legit. This guy, I do think is going to be I think he's going to be a first rounder, maybe not necessarily top 10, but I think he has that kind of tools to where, Andre Carter from Army.
Let him get the Army.
They haven't had a player drafted Army in the top outside before the 7th round since the 40s. So that's why it's a little off the radar.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to go check his tape out, and I'm sure a lot of people are now that you're talking about it, are going to go put an eye on him and probably take credit for it. But we definitely heard it here first from you, so that's awesome. But just right before we wrap up, I always do a segment. It's called One of None moment, where actually Deshaun Kaiser, he founded a company called One of None, and so I work pretty close with him, and we have a great relationship. So I always talk about, and I love the meaning of one of none, to where it's just like a one of one moment, a one of something that is one of one that can't be replicated, or just like a memory that has happened that has shaped pretty much your foundation. And so I always talk about, before I started this podcast, it was always football, like what I did at Notre Dame, some big plays that I made at Notre Dame that kind of just made me realize it was okay, I belong at this level. It gave me something that gave me chills or something. But now, recently, since I started the podcast, I did an episode with some Browns players, Jeremiah Wusu-Koromora and Greg Newsome. I was out just having a drink with some friends, and someone came up to me and goes, "Are you Shaun Crawford?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm thinking, is it because of football? I'm at home, so a lot of people know me from football. And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You have the Varsity House Podcast, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so it's from then, that dude became my favorite person. Just because it was not only just because obviously he watched it, but it was just he actually paid attention. He took something from it. Whether that may be just the OBJ stuff we talked about, or maybe just the draft experience that those guys went through, to where we were just being transparent. But for that was a one of none moment to me, because I feel I'll always remember that first time that someone has recognized me from my new journey. So I say that to say it could be a moment, it could be sports, it could be life, it could be anything career related or not career related, but just something that kind of just stuck out to you as your one of none moment.
So about people coming up to you, I had a lot of people coming up to me after the Bachelorette. Obviously throughout Cincinnati. And I had one weird ass one where I'm at an FC Cincinnati game here, the soccer team. And a mom comes up to me. She's probably 50. She's like, "If I buy you a beer, will you take a picture with my daughter?" And there's a 10-year-old girl behind her, cowering. I'm like, "Yeah, you don't even have to buy me a beer." And she still bought me a beer, and I took a picture with her daughter. That was a weird one. But I'm trying to think a moment where I think back in 2017, so before I was even on The Bachelorette, I was on the SI live coverage of the first round of the draft. And I just remember sitting there, and it was actually the day of my birthday back in 2017. I think my birthday's April 27th, so the draft always falls around it. And I always loved the draft growing up. My dad would buy me a draft guide for my birthday every single year. And so it's something that I was really passionate about. And to be on and it wasn't on TV, it was on SI's website, whatever, but it was live streaming. To be on it, giving a draft, I was like, wow, this is, if I was 13-year-old me would have been watching this guy right now, which was so cool to think about.
Awesome. Carl, what about you?
I guess my one of none moment would kind of be the end of my football career. I guess that would be the one of my moment. And like you said, my entire life was revolved around football, or sports in general, you chose your high school based off athletics, you chose the college based off athletics, but the 2020 NFL draft, where in the back of my head, there was a 0.1% chance that you'll get picked and all that. But, that irrational confidence gets you to that point anyways, right? That's how you make it that far in sports in general. And then that day goes by where, no one calls, and then no agents and stuff like that. Even though the chances are slim, but it doesn't happen. And you sit there and you're like, man, this is rough. Like, my identity that I thought that I was is gone. So where do you pivot from here? And I'll never forget, my pops looked at me and he was like, this is just the start of something special. And for me, it was like we talked about earlier, sports media. I've always been passionate in that and talking sports, and I feel as if, I told myself I'm going to be around sports regardless, whether it's playing, coaching, or talking about it. I'm going to be in that sports realm. And I even though it may not be the positive moment that you guys just alluded to, I guess for me, it was that somber pit feeling that I had. I'm like, you know what, man, like this is going to be something special for me. So I would say draft day as well for me, but in a negative light.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool because I had someone else on and I learned a new term, Pronoya, and it's just like a moment that happens that leads to something next, or like if if for me personally, like say my injuries, that's something that may look bad in the moment or seem bad in the moment, kind of may be something that leads to who you become for good or for something that's better. So that's kind of how like I've been just like thinking about a lot of things, and I would say like it's just the opposite of paranoia, but it's pronoia. And I mean, things happen, and I mean, I feel like in the moment to where it's like when I was getting injured at Notre Dame, it's like it's the worst thing ever. But then now looking back on it, it was like I got to go to 2 college football playoffs. I got to be named captain at Notre Dame. I got to meet a lot more people. Just all those things to where it's like those were things that I paid attention to at that moment. So definitely moments that I appreciate. Draft day. I mean, obviously, it's probably a good day for a lot of people, and it's a good day or a bad day for a lot of people. So, again, I mean, I thought this was a great conversation. I know I had a little difficulties with the whole connection and things like that, but Mike, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy. You probably gotta get back and start looking at all the college games and things that are heading up for this season, but. Appreciate you coming on, and definitely Carl as well. So, Mike Renner, lead draft analyst at PFF, and then Carl Jones, sports anchor out in Rochester. So, appreciate you guys again. We'll definitely have this conversation again soon. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed another episode of Varsity House Podcast. We thank you to all the players and the coaches who came on the show. I mean, it's not easy for them to take time out of their day and just to give us a glimpse into the program. I'm here at Varsity House. We always want to make sure that we're delivering great content to our fans. So please like, comment, subscribe, and please leave reviews on teams we should do next, players you want on, and questions you want asked. Thank you again, and let's make it happen.